Hello, everyone, and welcome to our episodes of the ECOP program webinar series, which is already our episode number 30, hosting two great speakers from SkyTruth. Thank you so much, Bimini and Eric, for being with us today, and we are very much excited about your presentations today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. My name is Eugenia. I will be your moderator. I'm the global coordinator of the ECOP program, so the UN Ocean Decade program to support early career ocean professionals. So today we have a very interesting conversation about tools to detect pollution. So SkyTruth is a conservation technology nonprofit that utilizes satellite imagery, machine learning, and big data to make hidden environmental problems visible, measurable, and actionable. So I think they have a fantastic motto which says, if you can see it, you can change it, sharing the view from space to promote conservation for people and the planet. I think it's a great motto, a great vision, and I'm really very much excited about this topic today. Before satellite technology, destructive environmental actions often remained hidden from view. SkyTruth uses the latest technology to make stunning satellite imagery and other robust remote sensing data accessible to anyone for free, to hold polluters and others accountable for harmful activities that would otherwise remain hidden from view. I think this is fantastic and really very important, especially for ECOPs who sometimes don't know where to get satellite imagery for free. Sometimes there are companies that actually charge them for imagery that should be and are for free, and they just don't know that these can be freely accessible. So I think this information that we will hear about today and these products that Bimini and Eric will be talking about today will be really very useful for all of you who joined us today. As well, I'm very happy to introduce both speakers today. So they'll be giving presentations about two different products that they work on at SkyTruth. So we have here today Bimini Hortzman and Eric Taylor. Bimini is SkyTruth's impact analyst. She's building partnerships, supporting product delivery, and coordinating stakeholder engagement. With expertise, with experience spanning sustainability and conservation research, she brings expertise in biodiversity and cross-cultural collaboration. Eric works as Impact Program Manager, coordinating research and outreach to ensure tools and data sets drive real-world change. He previously supported a global coalition on indigenous and communal and rights at the Rights and Resources Initiative. So I'm very happy to have both of you here, and thank you again for kindly agreeing to be speakers with us today. Right, so before we start, I would like to say just a few words about our housekeeping rules today. So we have, as always in our webinars, we have a chat where you can, say where you are from, just briefly to break the ice, and share any links maybe from your projects for other attendees to collaborate with you. However, if you have questions to the speakers, please use our section Q&A, because this will be easier for them and for us to track those questions and answer them properly. So we will have two presentations, first by Bimini and then by Eric, and then we'll have time for a Q&A after their presentations. So your questions in the Q&A can be answered during the presentations, or if they require really complex response, then we will take them to the Q&A section and ask Bimini or Eric to really comment on them for everyone else to hear as well. Thank you very much for your understanding for that. So with that, I'll just start a quick poll to see who we have today. Just a second. Let's just see what regions we have now. I hope you can see the poll. We have two questions. We have two questions. So where are you joining us from? I hope everybody can see the poll. Yes, thank you. And then we have a second question, which is what is your background? So that we can understand where you're coming from and whether you work in ocean conservation and how the products of SkyTruth can be applicable to your work. So I'm just give you some time to reply to the poll. So we have Northern America, South America, Northern Europe, Western Europe, Southern Europe, Western Africa. Not so many people from Africa, unfortunately. Southeastern Asia, also very few. We have pretty good attendance. So it would be really interesting to see what's your background too. Okay, so we have 23 responses. So thank you. I'll just stop the poll. And let's see what we have today. So we have 5 people from Northern America and 3 from South America, Northern Europe and Western Europe, Southern Europe too. Yeah, so just 5 people from Africa and 1 person from Southeastern Asia. Yeah, I guess it's just getting very late for the Asian region. Wonderful. And let's see about your background. Yeah, so we have attendees with background in marine conservation, biotechnology, research analyst, monitoring approaches for water in Latin America, fisheries and environment engineer, conservation ecologist, conservation, intelligence and compliance analyst, computer science, environmental engineering, data and software project management, biologist, and environmental consulting from Peru. All right, well, thank you very much. So I wish you and all of us a great webinar, and let's start. So I will hand over to Bimini for her presentation. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that amazing intro, Yevgenia. And now let's get into the presentation. So hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Oh, great.
And awesome. So welcome. Today we're going to talk about how open data and satellite tools can empower you as early career leaders to drive campaigns, influence policy, and protect our ocean planet. So, who is SkyTruth? SkyTruth is a conservation technology organization that was founded in 2001. It's headquartered in the United States, and our work has a global reach. We specialize in using satellite imagery, AI, and open data to make environmental problems actionable and measurable. We turn satellite data into public evidence. So we don't run marine protected areas ourselves, but we give people like you the tools to hold decision makers accountable and push for better protections of the ocean. We are best known for our projects like detecting oil spills from space and co-founding Global Fishing Watch, which some of you may have heard of. Our mission is to democratize access to conservation data so that conservation and advocacy organizations can take informed action at scale. So, a SkyTruth's model is designed to bridge advances in Earth observation into practical tools for environmental protection. So, our work is grounded in relationships with the organizations and communities that use our tools, and those are often the ones who are most impacted by pollution. These partners help to shape our priorities and help to protect biodiversity at a global scale. So our role is not to speak for affected communities, but to amplify their efforts with data, evidence, and visibility. Some examples of our work include, as you can see on the left of this slide here, revealing chronic oil pollution in areas such as the Niger Delta in Africa, using our tool Cerulean. We have also released a report on oil pollution and fossil fuel threats in the Coral Triangle. And Eric will talk more about Cerulean later, but it is our tool that is the world's first free, publicly available technology that uses artificial intelligence and satellite imagery to track oil pollution from space. But a little bit closer to home in Central Appalachia, which is sort of in the northeast area of the United States, SkyTruth partners with Appalachian Voices to map the destruction caused by mountaintop mining, and we use several of our tools and data analytics to do this. We also help park rangers to shut down illegal mining operations in Peru that is destroying indigenous lands and poisoning rivers. Another tool that I will present on today that we have is the 30 by 30 progress tracker. So more coming on that later. So SkyTruth and the early career ocean professionals are highly aligned. For example, we provide compelling and trusted visuals and data to support storytelling at regional, national, and global scales. All of our tools are global but can also be scaled down to whatever regional or national scale you are interested in. So ECOP members, I know you have regional and national nodes. Our tools are very aligned with that. For example, the 30 by 30 tracker and Cerulean can both do global and regional analysis. And then in terms of training and monitoring, the intergenerational dialogue that ECOP encourages is highly aligned with SkyTruth as well, because our tools are designed to be very user-friendly for anyone and can work into a large variety of investigations and campaigns for people at any point in their career. In terms of capacity building and the Ocean Digital Academy, our tools can be integrated into curriculums because anyone with an internet connection worldwide can use our tools. So they can improve ocean literacy and access to data, empowering communities from all over the world. So the 10 challenges of the ocean decade that ECOP particularly works with, I know are 2, 3, 4, 9, and 10. Out of those, SkyTruth is most aligned, I would say, with number 2, protect and restore ecosystems and biodiversity through our 30 by 30 progress tracker. And also number 9, skills, technology, and knowledge for all, because our tools are accessible and usable by anyone. We also address understanding and beating marine pollution and creating a digital representation of the ocean as digital tools are becoming more and more relevant to the conservation movement. So now getting into our 30 by 30 progress tracker. So the progress tracker has 2 different main functions. One of them is to be able to see how close a specific country or region or the entire world is to achieving the UN's 30% target for protecting 30% of lands and oceans by 2030. It is also a free interactive program for government agencies, civil society campaigns, and the general public to be able to monitor, advocate for more and better quality marine protection and terrestrial protection. So the other function of the progress tracker is a conservation builder, which is meant to be a lightweight spatial planning tool to mock up a new protected area and see not only where you would be protecting, but what you would be protecting in terms of habitats. And this is not meant to be a super heavy duty conservation builder used by governments, but more to provide visuals for advocacy campaigns and evidence-based research towards better protections in the ocean. So now I am going to do a live demo of the 30 by 30 progress tracker. Let's see. So hopefully everyone can see my screen here. This is the 30 by 30 progress tracker. So when you first enter to the tool, you can see the progress towards terrestrial and marine conservation globally. So terrestrial is at 17% and marine is at almost 10%. So let's say we want to look at a particular country. I know one of you in the chat said that you were from Spain, so we can look into Spain specifically. So to change location, you can just type any country that you want to look at. And here we can see how close Spain is to marine conservation goal of 30% by 2030. I know that Spain also has the 10% highly protected goal. So if we want to investigate certain areas, so for example, let's go over here. We have many different layers in the map that we can explore. So these purple areas are protected areas, and those come from Protected Planet, and we update those regularly. We can also see the protection level. If it's dark purple, it's fully or highly protected according to MPA Atlas's assessment, or it can be less protected or not evaluated. We can also see exactly which habitats we are protecting here. So we can turn on those layers for which type of ecosystems we may be protecting. We also have fishing protections on here, as well as fishing effort coming directly in from Global Fishing Watch. Sometimes that one takes a second to load, but so this is the apparent fishing effort taken in from Global Fishing Watch's tools. So there's a lot of different layers that you can explore in here depending on what your goals are. We also have target areas based on scientific studies. So let's just turn off this so we can see a little bit better. We can see where it is recommended to protect next. So according to this study, let's see. According to this study, we have, you can see it lighting up in brown around here, adequate protections, but according to some other studies, we need to definitely add more protections in this area. So you can also see the progress towards 30 by 30 over time, which can be useful, as well as different stats on the percentage of habitats that are protected within these areas. So that is just a quick demo of the 30 by 30 tracker. And we're going to get a little bit more into the specifics here soon. So we have a brand new update that has not been actually officially released yet, but in 30 by 30 now, it has been highly requested to create custom regions. So for example, there are a lot of groups that work only in the Mediterranean or only in the Caribbean, and they want to add the specific countries that they work with to see their collective progress towards the 30 by 30 goal. So now in 30 by 30, you can create your own custom regions very easily by just adding the countries that you are interested in seeing the collective progress towards. So now we're going to see some of the specific questions that the 30 by 30 progress tracker can help us to answer. So let's go and use an example in the Caribbean. So we can zoom to certain regions of the ocean. I'm going to turn these off. And let's say we're interested in the Caribbean and creating a new protected area. So we can see in purple the areas which are already protected here. And we can turn on some of these habitat layers to see maybe which habitats are not receiving the protection that they might need. So here we can see in red, we have the warm water corals. So we can see that there are a lot of warm water corals in this area. There are also, let's see, the yellow, I believe, is mangroves. So we have mangroves along this coast. And so let's say we wanted to designate a new protected area or just see how that would help towards 30 by 30 progress. So now we have what we call the conservation builder. So to draw a shape, it's very easy. You just double click an area on the map. See if we get all of these. And you can easily just start over again if you misclick like I just did. Perfect. So now we have this new proposed protected area, and we can see that it would increase terrestrial conservation progress and as well as a national level contribution to 30 by 30 progress. So you can see which country that is by turning on those boundaries and going back into the progress tracker. So that would be in the Bahamas. And yeah, that is how we use the conservation builder, and it can be really helpful to generate visuals for advocacy campaigns or anything where you want to show progress towards 30 by 30. So now into a more specific scenario, imagine that you're mobilizing support for an MPA proposal in Malaysia. As I know, ECOP works a little bit in Malaysia, but it is very late there now, so probably not a lot of people joining from there at the moment. But think about what kind of data you'd want to highlight in your campaign, petition, or on social media. This is where the conservation builder can also come in handy. So if we zoom to Malaysia here, we can see in orange that is the Malaysian exclusive economic zone. Can see there in terms of marine conservation coverage, there is only 4.8%. So if we're trying to mobilize more support for marine conservation protection in Malaysia, you can see here, remember the red was the warm water corals, so we can see that this area might benefits from some more protection. So let's try and see what happens when we do that. So for marine, this increases us to 6.9% on the national level just by protecting these corals. And of course, there are a lot more considerations to take into account when doing marine spatial planning. And this is not a decision-making tool for governments by any means, but when used in conjunction with some of our other tools that Eric will show soon, like Cerulean for oil pollution, it can be extremely powerful in mobilizing support for protection. So now I am going to stop sharing for now and just share a little bit about my own career journey since I am an early career ocean professional myself. I recently finished an Erasmus Mundus master's degree in marine environment and resources. And before that, I was a intern with SkyTruth's geospatial internship program because I wanted to learn more about conservation technology and how geospatial tools are helping with that. So SkyTruth's internship program is really great. You do need an address in the US in order to participate, but I encourage you to look at the website and see if it's something that interests you. So after gaining some of those more technical skills, I joined SkyTruth's team full-time as part of the impact team. So while understanding how these tools work on the more technical end, I'm able to engage with users such as yourselves to make sure that these tools are meeting the needs of the conservation community. So that is where I'm at in my early career ocean professional journey, and I will hand it over to my colleague Eric now to present on Cerulean. But first, we're going to do a little poll about ocean pollution.
Thank you so much, Bimini, and that was really great, very interesting, and thank you for sharing your own journey. I think it's very important for our audience today. I will start the poll now. I hope you see that. So we have a question: is oil pollution a threat or a challenge that you encounter in your conservation work? So you can say yes or no, or maybe you are unsure about this your situation. I bet some of you work with oil pollution, and that would be really interesting to see how important it is for your work before we go over to Eric to present a product that specifically deals with oil pollution identification. Thank you very much for your activity. I see that really almost 70% is very active, which is really great. Thank you for your responses. So currently we have 56% of respondents who said that yes, oil pollution is a threat. 24% said that no, it's not a threat or a challenge. And 90% is unsure. So maybe they don't deal with oil pollution in their conservation work.
All right. Well, thank you for answering that poll, everyone. And it's interesting to see that a majority of you do believe that you encounter oil pollution in your work as a challenge, which is good because I do want to pivot a little bit to talking about our work on chronic oil pollution, which is one of our flagship programs here at SkyTruth. By the way, my name is Eric Teller. I'm the Impact Program Manager. And I do see a couple of questions coming into the chat and the Q&A. Just know that we will circle back to the 30 by 30 progress tracker at the end of this. So questions that pertain to that or any other aspect of this presentation, we'll just get to them towards the end, but really glad to see the interest coming in there. So I want to talk a little bit about our work on oil slick detection. For a long time, SkyTruth has been interested in this problem of chronic marine oil pollution beyond major oil spills that grab headlines like the BP Deepwater Horizon spill. We have observed these small and persistent oil slicks that often occur repeatedly in the same geographies over time. These are the result of often intentional discharges by vessels or fossil fuel infrastructure operating off the coast. And individually, they're pretty small, but over the years and decades that they accumulate, they can add up to a significant pollution burden in particular places. And often these are regions of the world where perhaps resources may be limited or political will may be limited to tackle this problem. And in addition to that, operators being far offshore believe that they won't be able to get caught. And so that creates a sort of culture of impunity around the improper dumping of oily waste into the ocean. Now, the way that we're attempting to solve this is by using the fact that these oil slicks, while they're hard to detect from people uh, just based on shore and in situ observation, they're quite easy to identify on satellite images, particularly radar images. As you can see on this slide, they leave a very distinctive dark streak. These are real examples of two oil slicks from oil and gas infrastructure. Um, and we spent years examining these images, outlining potential oil slicks, and training a machine learning model to recognize characteristics on an image that are consistent with an oil slick. So now we have an AI model that automatically scans Sentinel-1 radar imagery of the world's ocean and detects potential oil slicks. We are also able to match those potential slicks with their sources. Due to our partnership with Global Fishing Watch, we have data on the AIS tracks of all large vessels transiting the world's ocean, as well as the locations of offshore oil and gas infrastructure. And we're able to match slicks to the likely sources based on the patterns that we see in that data. And all of this led to the launch of Cerulean, which you can see here. This is the user interface. It's the world's first free and open source automated oil pollution monitoring tool. So this, of course, is a map of the world's ocean with potential oil slicks highlighted in orange. You can highlight marine protected areas, exclusive economic zones, and explore this map at your leisure after this call. But I do want to emphasize the slicks in this global map are mostly unreviewed. They should be considered potential detections from our AI model. This machine learning system is really fast at analyzing all of the world's radar imagery and identifying likely slicks. But it's not going to be as good as a human being at actually understanding the nuances of what might make something an oil slick versus just a pattern on the water that looks like one. And I'm happy to get into that more with questions if anyone has questions about why false positives happen. But what's important to note is that we've recently introduced slick verification as a feature directly in the Cerulean app. Previously, you had to email us if you thought you were unsure about a slick in Cerulean, but now you can identify a slick like this one from a tanker in the example here and request verification if you're logged into a free account. And we'll get back to you as soon as possible with our opinion on whether or not this is, in fact, a legitimate oil slick and whether the identified source is truly the source. This is quite a step forward for Cerulean because it's actually quite easy for our experts to verify an oil slick once we know where to look. So this should make it a lot faster and easier to get accurate information for whatever kind of work you're doing that relates to this. This is an example of spotting a repeat polluter in Cerulean and getting a little bit more information about the source vessel. But I also want to give you a little demonstration of what that looks like in a minute. And before that, I wanted to share an example of what we actually do with this data. So we work with advocacy organizations, investigative journalists, government agencies, really anyone who has an interest in tackling this problem, either from an individual enforcement standpoint or from a broader advocacy and campaign standpoint to clean up the world's oceans. And so we worked with the Greenpeace Bulgaria office to examine every potential oil slick in Bulgaria's waters. We reviewed all the potential slicks detected in Ceruleans, ruled out the false positives, and we were left with 170 oil slicks over the course of a year in Bulgaria's EEZ. Greenpeace was able to take this data from Cerulean and bring it into their own system through our API. And this enabled them to publish this interactive map, which, as we understand, made quite a significant media impression in Bulgaria. No one on staff can read Bulgarian, but we're told it was pretty successful, and Greenpeace is considering expanding this campaign to other countries in the region. So that's just one very recent example of how we work with partners to amplify this data. And that's a large portion of what Bimini and I do here at SkyTruth. So if you have an idea for how this data could be applied, we really hope that you'll get in touch with us to share your ideas and exchange some thoughts. So now I'm going to switch screens to give you a little bit of a demo of what Cerulean looks like in practice using the MMSI number here of a vessel that we think has been polluting. You can just give me 1 minute and I will get Cerulean up on the screen for you. All right, so this is what it looks like as of today. This is the global oil slick pollution map. And on the left, you can see a variety of ways to search for slicks, rule out things that you're not interested in, find things that you are interested in. Today, I'm going to show the search for MMSI numbers, which is sort of like a license plate number for a vessel at sea. It's a unique identifier. And in this case, we're going to check out a particular vessel that may be of interest. So I've searched for MMSI, and it's going to take a few seconds to scroll through all of the 6,000 potential slicks that are on the screen right now and identify the ones that are attributable just to this particular vessel. All right, so now it's done with that query, and you can see that there are two slicks, one in the Gulf of Mexico in the US and one in the Pelagos Marine Sanctuary off the coast of Italy. So just click on the Gulf of Mexico slick. You can get a little bit more information about this source vessel. You can see that this has already been verified by the SkyTruth team manually as the source. And if you open up source profile here on the screen, you can see a lot more contextual information about this vessel. So this is a tanker called the Bocha Mumbai, flagged in Hong Kong, associated with two slicks, total area of 23 square kilometers. And you can see, even though we've selected the other oil slick, it is noting for you that this vessel has impacted an MPA in Europe. You can also see that it's been associated with 4 AIS off events. That's a concerning behavior because AIS, or Automatic Identification System, is the way that ships communicate their location with each other. It was initially introduced for safety reasons to avoid collisions in darkness or bad weather, but it's also useful for this type of accountability work. Understanding where vessels are gives you a sense of what they're doing. And so when a vessel turns off its AIS transponder repeatedly, that is concerning. We as SkyTruth staff are not able to tell you for sure whether this violates the law inherently, but it often does. Sometimes there are legitimate reasons to turn your AIS off, but sometimes it's meant to conceal behavior such as violating marine protections, um, visiting a port that maybe your vessel is not supposed to visit due to sanctions. So that's why we want to highlight things like AIS off events and vessel detentions, in which case this vessel doesn't have any. But this is the kind of profile of a vessel that you might want to look into. When we're talking to stakeholders who work directly in maritime law enforcement and security, um, we want to make clear that identifying these repeat polluters is a key value addition for Cerulean. Because if you have limited resources to investigate particular vessels, you might want to know which ones are likely polluting, which ones are repeatedly concealing their location from authorities. And Cerulean can help you do that. So we hope that you'll give it a try after this presentation and just check out any particular geographies or vessels that you're into yourself. There are a lot of ways, as I mentioned, to kind of filter for what you're interested in, not just searching by MMSI, but searching by flag state. If you're interested in all vessels flagged under your country, for instance, or if you're interested in slicks from infrastructure, slicks from floating infrastructure, liquid natural gas, sanctioned vessels. And it's also possible to draw or upload your own custom area of interest if you're looking at a particular ecosystem or geography. So there are a lot of ways to narrow down the thousands of slicks that you see on Cerulean and get a better sense of what exactly you're looking for. But now I want to turn it back over to Bimini to talk a little bit about potential intersections between these two tools. If you're monitoring marine protected areas and you want to understand both pollution and protection status, then there's some potential to do that. And Bimini, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the overlap between these two tools. So this is on the right, you can see the shapefile of a protected area that is called east of Gannett and Montrose Fields in the United Kingdom. So if we go back to the progress tracker, this is the landing page, by the way, and you enter to the progress tracker like this. So we can search a country, United Kingdom, and let's say we're interested in this protected area here. So we know that the United Kingdom on the marine side appears to be making great progress towards their marine conservation goals. However, this number is a little bit skewed because of the territories that the United Kingdom has in the Caribbean. But then if you enter into Cerulean, you can actually see if you're interested in this protected area, you can turn on Marine Protected Areas layer. And we can look at, let's say, from the beginning of 2023, because that is when Cerulean's model started running. And we have the most imagery starting back from then. If we zoom in on this protected area, we can actually see that there have been several oil slicks within it. And we can investigate into those and do what Eric previously described, which is request verification for these oil slicks. And that's just an example of how we can use Cerulean alongside the progress tracker to monitor not only where marine protected areas are, but how are they doing and what are they protecting and how well are they doing at their goals. So we can see here a slick potentially associated with a piece of infrastructure, right, in an MPA. So it's another example of how these tools can be used. And now I think we can go into our discussion section. So thank you all very much. And I'm excited to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. Two fantastic presentations. I'm very happy that we have actually a lot of comments and questions in the Q&A. So let's just dive in to answer those questions. So I will read the questions from the Q&A, and please, those who have asked their questions in the chat, please post it in the Q&A section so that we don't lose any question from you. So let's start from the beginning. So we'll start with the questions that were addressed to the presentation, to the first presentation of Bimini. So Bimini, that would be questions to you first. So two questions from Emily. Where do data on extent of protected areas and their protection status come from, and how are those data vetted?
So thank you for that question. When you look at any of the data layers in the progress tracker, there is a little symbol next to them that is like an eye with a circle around it. If you click on that, for any of the layers, you can see the data source for that layer. And for the ones you were specifically asking about, the protected areas come from the World Database of Protected Areas or Protected Planet, and we regularly update those, and we've almost fully automated that process. So, and then the protection status, like I assume you mean the highly protected or not highly protected, that comes from MPA Atlas, their MPA guide assessment of marine protected area effectiveness. So one of the really helpful things about the 30 by 30 progress tracker is that rather than visiting all of these data sources individually, this is a place where all of that data is aggregated and hopefully most useful and efficient. So thank you for those questions.
Thank you very much. And then we go to our next question. Bimini, I love what you said about not speaking for communities, but helping to amplify their voices through data. This is a comment from Pete. Can you give an example of how communities used your data to advocate or enhance their management? Thank you, Pete, for this question.
I think Eric gave a really great example of that with Cerulean, with the recent Bulgaria investigation. But for some of our other tools, we have another tool that we didn't present here called Monitor, which is used by the Peruvian National Park Service to automatically detect illegal mining in the Amazon. So they regularly use our data to help make their management more effective. And you can explore more case studies and examples of things like this on our website.
Thank you. So our next question, again from Pete. Bimini, thank you for your patience if I missed it. But if there isn't much data available in a given region, for example, on corals, mangroves, etc., does SkyTruth play any role in filling gaps directly or indirectly?
So we do not perform in situ research on ecosystems ourselves, but part of what we do is build partnerships with organizations that do aggregate that data. So for example, we're currently working on getting more data in from the Allen Coral Atlas to have a more comprehensive coral data set. And we're always building partnerships and doing research to make sure that our data is as comprehensive as possible. I also want to mention that when you're using the progress tracker, at the top of the screen, there is something that says contact. And in there, you can put feature requests, product feedback, any data sources that you'd like to see visualized. You can add all of that in there. And we really do listen to our product feedback because we want it to be as useful as possible for all of our users. So please use that. And also we have in the pipeline a lot more product releases coming up. So soon you will be able to upload your own shape files into the 30 by 30 progress tracker, since that has been a very highly requested feature.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So let's proceed with our next question from Brett. When adding a custom area to the 30 by 30 tool, can we add a specific shapefile or just draw a polygon? At the moment, I can only draw a polygon. Will there be changes to allow users to ingest their own specific shapefiles to the tool?
Well, I think I just answered that
Yeah.
accidentally, got ahead of myself, but
Exactly.
yes, that is coming. And I would suggest following us for updates so that you can be alerted as soon as all of our product releases go live. So keep an eye out for that coming soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for highlighting this again for Brett. Okay, then I think we go to questions about the Cerulean. So a question from Renata. Could you share what kinds of geospatial tools and data formats the Cerulean project uses for detecting and analyzing oil slicks? For example, whether you work with shapefiles or other open geospatial data sets.
Sure. So the primary data input for Cerulean, the only data source that our model analyzes is Sentinel-1 satellite imagery. These are radar images published by the European Space Agency for free. We assess those images for potential slicks, and then it produces those outlines, those polygons that you saw on the screen. Those can be downloaded as shapefiles through the Cerulean API. They can be assessed in whatever system you're using to monitor the oceans. You don't have to work exclusively within the Cerulean user interface. Um, and yeah, we make those shape files available for download. You can also upload a shapefile of your own as an area of interest if that's something you're interested in. And generally, our tools and data sets are open. I hope that answers your question, but if there's anything more specific, please let me know and I can either answer it or take it to our development team.
Thank you, Eric. That's great. And then we have another question regarding working with oil spills. I think you might have briefly mentioned that in your presentation, but let's dive into that again. Does the SkyTruth team report vessels that show repeating oil leaks and or repeated ARS of events to authorities? Do you think there will be more enforcement of these offences now with the High Seas Treaty being implemented? These are questions from Amber. Thank you for these.
So to answer the first part of your question, Amber, we don't always report it. We don't have an automatic workflow that reports, for instance, repeated AIS off events or oil slicks. But we do seek that out. We've been developing partnerships with several national, regional, and global maritime law enforcement organizations to bring Cerulean into their workflow. We are also integrating Cerulean with maritime domain awareness systems like Skylight, which are used by numerous coast guards around the world to assess what's going on at sea. So this information is being directly presented to law enforcement agencies in the systems that they use. And we also have partnerships with organizations who may choose to do this as part of their strategies to protect the ocean. So the answer is often yes, but there isn't like a system directly in Cerulean that always does this. So we rely on partnerships to amplify that as well as integrations. The second part of your question kind of allows me to go on a useful digression, actually, because you mentioned the High Seas Treaty. Um, and we actually don't have a lot of coverage of the high seas with Sentinel-1 imagery. That is one limitation of the platform. The European Space Agency just doesn't really capture a lot of imagery of areas beyond countries' EEZs. So there are still these gaps in Cerulean far out at sea where oil pollution would not be spotted if it occurs, and we believe it probably does occur in those places. What Cerulean allows you to do is understand what's happening near your country's waters and monitor pollution there. But um, it won't directly enable this kind of enforcement of protected areas that are in the high seas in most cases. It might increase interest in law in maritime protection and enforcement more generally. It may also enable governments to identify repeat polluters, sanction them, and hold them accountable so that they're not sailing with the crews that are repeatedly dumping bilge waste into the water. So it may have benefits that would um, have a positive effect on high seas protected areas. But unfortunately, unless the European Space Agency starts to cover high seas protected areas with radar imagery so that we know what's going on, it won't be useful for enforcement directly, in that way.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive response. And Amber, please feel free to provide any follow-up questions or comments if you like to this. But Eric, thank you so much. We have yet another question on Cerulean from Zoe. Can you also monitor and track oil pollution by smaller vessels? So vessels that are not oil tankers and have a gross tonnage of less than 400 tons, or can only big vessels be tracked? Why? Thank you.
So the answer is partially yes. Not all of the vessels that we identify as polluters are oil tankers. Um, any vessel that any fossil fuel powered vessel essentially is capable of bilge dumping because they're often dumping out waste fuel rather than waste product. Tankers additionally can undergo what's called tank washing, where they wash out the oily residues of the tanks that are holding their product into the ocean. So that's another form of oily waste dumping. And it's one reason why tankers are a frequently identified source of oil slicks at sea. But regular major cargo vessels also have been identified as affiliated with oil slicks. We also are able to track other types of vessels, and in fact, sometimes we identify other types of oil pollution. Cerulean can't really distinguish between different types of oil. So a petroleum-based oil slick and a slick of fish oil or palm oil will look almost identical on a radar image. So you kind of have to use your context to determine whether you think this is a petroleum-based oil slick or something else. If you see a slick behind a fishing vessel, it could be that the fishing vessel is bilge dumping, or it could be that they're processing their catch on board and there's a trail of fish oil following the vessel. So that is a challenge when we talk about working with enforcement agencies. Using this data alone, we can't always say this is definitely an oil slick and it's definitely illegal under the Marine Pollution Convention or other applicable laws because there's a lot more that goes into it. This is useful as the starting point of an investigation, though. Um, and then your question, I think, also implies this question about whether we can track slicks from vessels that are not broadcasting AIS. Smaller vessels, as you might be aware, are not required to do so under international law, although some do. And you can spot slicks that are not from AIS producing vessels. You can still spot the vessel itself on an image as this sort of bright spot, almost like a star in the night sky. And Cerulean has actually been recently updated to identify these as dark vessels. So if you see a slick with a vessel clearly in the image, but we don't have a matching AIS track for that vessel, it will identify it as a dark vessel slick. And as I mentioned before, that vessel could have been a larger vessel that was not running AIS with the specific intent to bilge dump without being tracked. And so that enabled us to help starting to track that pattern of behavior. Although without the AIS, we can't tell you the name or flag of the vessel or any identifying information. So yeah, your question actually implies a wide variety of different scenarios about whether you can identify pollution on Cerulean, and generally you can. If the vessel is polluting in scene and there's a satellite overhead capturing the image, we'll be able to find that slick. But the context about what we can say about the slick and the source will vary based on whether AIS is being broadcast and what class of vessel it might be.
Thank you. Thanks for this really comprehensive response. That's really very interesting. And then we have another question on a similar topic from Sandra. When it comes to the data addressing oil slicks, doesn't it also include data from oil leaks from real oil sources offshore? And if so, is there a risk that data will be misused for illegal offshore oil drilling?
Um, that's a great question. So what I think Sandra is getting at is that in certain parts of the world, there are what we call natural seeps of oil that just leaks from the bottom of the ocean and ends up on the surface We see this in places with significant offshore oil fields like the Gulf of Mexico. So it often correlates with oil drilling activity. The tricky thing about this is that you often have a geography where there are natural seeps on the water, and there are also oil and gas rigs drilling for oil. Those oil rigs might be um, spilling oil themselves. They might be leaking produced water into the ocean. So Cerulean will spot slicks from natural seeps and slicks from anthropogenic sources from industry in very similar locations. That is a challenge for our model, to be transparent. It's something that we're actively working on right now. We have staff looking into natural seeps and identifying the particular patterns they follow to differentiate them from anthropogenic oil slicks. But natural seeps do remain one notable source of false positives in cerulean. I mentioned false positives before. Other reasons for a false positive could be strange currents, weather patterns, certain types of sea ice. So that just demonstrates the importance of using that verified slick feature and getting in touch with us to make sure that we think a slick is real, because sometimes our model can make mistakes, especially when there's a natural seep involved. And then the second part of your question about whether we're concerned that the industry will use this data to identify spots to drill for oil. Um, it's something we've considered. We're not incredibly concerned about it because the industry has access to paid data sets on the geology and geography of those areas on where to drill for oil that are going to far outstrip anything that we're providing to them in terms of usefulness to oil and gas exploration activity. If uh, if it's visible through a natural seep on cerulean, there's a good chance that the fossil fuel industry is already aware of it, and whether or not they're making plans to drill there may be related to other political and economic factors. So uh, we do struggle with the implications of publishing open source data tools out there because anyone can use them, right? And our terms of service say that all use must be for environmental conservation purposes. We don't have a way to enforce that. So we do try to thoughtfully engage to make sure that our tools are only used in the right way. In this specific case, we see it as more important to provide this public service for people to understand uh, where oil slicks are happening and to really see the routine consequences of oil and gas industry operation offshore. We don't think the risk that this will be used for uh, to support offshore drilling operations is very high, though.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's always this balance of making a great product and making sure that it's not used for something wrong, right? Yeah, thank you so much for your answer. So I've done with the questions from the Q&A section, and then I will still check questions that were put in the chat. So there's one technical question. Can we download any data layer from the SkyTruth Cerulean or 30 by 30 tracker?
So, Eric, do you want to start with Cerulean, what you can download from there?
Yeah, you can download slicks as polygons, shape files from Cerulean, whether like within your area of interest or otherwise, as you've identified them. You can also, this is not a GIS thing, but you can create an incident report of an individual slick and its source and get that information in a printable PDF if that's easier for you.
And for the 30 by 30 tracker, I would recommend actually going to the data source where they're all cited. So you can click on the link to where the tracker is pulling in the data from. I'd recommend going there and downloading the data from those sources rather than directly from the 30 by 30 tracker, because that is meant to be a data aggregator, not a first source of the data, because we are not collecting the data ourselves, but we're aggregating it from other trusted sources in the field.
Thank you. Thanks. And there was also one question that Eric answered previously. So there was a question whether anyone can access the SkyTruth conservation map from anywhere in the world. And yes, so Eric has replied that yes, and as long as you have an internet connection, anybody can access these resources. Right, I think there were no other questions in the chat, and then we have a new one in the Q&A section. Actually two. Okay, so one is from Sandra. Which authorities are cooperating with you at the moment from Sweden?
We don't have any partnerships with authorities in Sweden yet, but if you have contacts or suggestions, then that's more than welcome.
Thank you, Sandra. So if you have any recommendations or suggestions, please feel free to drop it in the Q&A or in the chat for Eric and Bimini. So another question is from Emily. So many marine and terrestrial protected areas in the protected planet data set are invalid in that they have not yet been designated and are not actually protected, etc. Does SkyTruth vet these data sources?
That's a great question. So for marine protected areas, we use the effectiveness assessment from the MPA guide, so you can visualize those protection levels more specifically in a layer on there. In terms of terrestrial, there isn't really a globally trusted model to evaluate terrestrial protected area effectiveness at the moment, but we recently launched our own pilot project about that, using satellite data to monitor land use change in terrestrial protected areas over time in order to evaluate how effective they've been. So it is definitely a complicated question because there are so many factors that go into what makes a protected area actually protected and actually effective. But we are working on making that more clear in the tracker for sure. And I'll put our blog post about that terrestrial protected area effectiveness pilot in the chat now too, if you're curious.
I actually would just add on this note that the protected planet data set is something rather close to an official source. It contains protected area boundaries that are reported by governments. And I think that's a completely valid point that perhaps some of these areas might not be as protected as governments claim. We're not the experts on that, but that's actually why we put it out there alongside these other data sets like MP Atlas assessments, protected planet or protected seas assessments of fishing protection, because we want people to see these together and ask questions. That's the significance of this project, really. So we definitely applaud people actively looking into this data and making sure that governments are held accountable to their commitments to actually designate and equitably and effectively implement those protected areas.
Great answer. Thank you so much. And please check the link that just a second. So Bimini is sharing the link that she just mentioned. I'll just put it in the chat for everyone. So this is the blog she mentioned on the terrestrial protected area effectiveness pilot. So I put that in the chat. And also, so Eric and Bimini, if you think that you should share any specific links with the attendees in our chat, please feel free to do so. So we have shared the overall SkyTruth website link, but if you would like to share the specific links or any specific resources that you'd like to pay attention to, please feel free to do that in the meantime in the chat. And we have another question from Renata. And again, thank you very much to our audience for this brilliant interactiveness. That's really going great. Thank you so much for the many questions that you have. So Renata is saying, congratulations on your excellent collaboration with Greenpeace Bulgaria to detect oil slicks in the Black Sea. Could you share whether you are continuing to monitor that area? And if so, what recent trends or updates you have observed?
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited about that collaboration. It's very recent, so it's too early to say whether there are any trends or updates really, as the map was just published a few weeks ago. But we definitely are seeing a lot of interest in this coming from Bulgarian authorities, both either positive and negative, right? There are definitely industry operations in the region that want to clean up their name in relation to this, but we definitely intend to continue working with Greenpeace and providing the support that they need to keep monitoring this area.
Thank you. I think that's a great example that's great collaboration in the country for oil pollution prevention. And we have another question from Amber. Could you briefly talk about your partnership with Global Fishing Watch? Do you use your tools to detect fishing vessels going into protected areas where they should not be?
So I can talk about this, and Bimini, if you have anything to add, please feel free to. That specific use case about detecting fishing vessels entering protected areas is more the kind of thing that Global Fishing Watch would do themselves. So we encourage you to talk to them if you're interested in learning a bit more about how they use their tools that way. Our partnership with them began about 10 years ago when we worked with Oceana and Google to create Global Fishing Watch. It was launched and spun off as its own organization that's now very large and very successful. We still work with them pretty closely, particularly on Cerulean. We obtain AIS data from them on vessel locations. We also collaborate with them to develop an infrastructure data set. Global Fishing Watch maintains data on essentially all human, commercial, and industrial activity at sea as part of what they call the Open Ocean Project. And we are collaborators on the oil and gas component of that. So we work with them to illuminate the presence of oil and gas infrastructure at sea, as well as tracking vessel visits to and from oil and gas extraction sites and related oil slicks. So yeah, we continue to work with them pretty closely and often give joint presentations on that work.
Great, thank you. I think this is again a great example of actual usage of these great tools. Thank you. So I guess this was no, that's not the last one. What is your ambition for the future with SkyTruth? A project you are working at the moment, not released yet. That was a question from Sandra. So I guess what is your ambition for the future for SkyTruth? This is a very interesting question.
That is a really interesting question. Maybe both of us can answer this, but I would say a lot of my ambition actually relates to continuing to improve Cerulean and continuing to work with partners on it. We really think there is opportunity to get this data directly into the hands of maritime law enforcement and make it much, much more difficult for vessels to bilge dump. Really directly cracking down on this problem of chronic oil pollution that was banned 50 years ago under international law, but still persists to this day. So that's one ambition I have now. And then some of our more exciting projects relate to the technical pilots that Bimini briefly mentioned on terrestrial protected area effectiveness. We also would love to work more on monitoring methane emissions offshore from oil and gas and vessels. it's a very difficult technical challenge, but there may be some ways to use satellite imagery to help crack that. So there's a lot of potential there, but nothing that we're really ready to build a entirely new product or tool on yet.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I think something else that we have in the pipeline is we will be releasing a report ahead of COP30 in Brazil this year, which is in about a month. We'll be releasing a comprehensive report about the threats of offshore oil and gas in Brazil. This relates to both our work with Cerulean and 30 by 30 because it relates to protection commitments versus reality and balancing biodiversity protection with economic expansion in Brazil, since they have a lot of new proposed offshore drilling projects going on. So I'm excited to see how that report goes and the reaction to it at COP as well.
Oh wow, that would be really really great. That's amazing, to connect it to the COP 30. Well, thank you so much for these brilliant responses. That was really very interactive and I think extremely useful for our audience. I think we have answered all the questions. We have just really about time to just wrap up this webinar. If somebody has their last burning questions, they are very welcome to still post them, but we have just about 10 minutes before the end of the webinar. So I just want to thank again Bimini and Eric for this wonderful presentations today. And I would like to give you just a few minutes to wrap up and maybe, provide some final words on your products, maybe, give some tips or recommendations or valuable links, anything that you deem important for our audience. So Bimini, maybe we can start with you and then Eric.
Sure. Thank you all so much for coming and being so engaged. I would say that this data can, especially from Cerulean, can integrate into really any project that you're working on in marine science. So whether you're a chemist or biologist, this problem of chronic pollution is pervasive and it affects all ocean processes. So it's worth looking into no matter where your study site might be for your research. And I hope that you try out our tools for yourselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, and I'll give now the floor to you, and then we'll have one question still. So Eric, over to you.
Um, sure, I think Bimini really said it all, and I don't need to repeat ourselves, but thank you all very much for joining us. I did share one additional link in the chat related to some of our pilot work on detecting offshore methane, because I did mention that previously, and just emphasizing that there is a lot of opportunity to use approaches like this to bring transparency to what's going on at sea. And we're a small team, we're doing our best, but we really welcome conversations and collaborations with those of you who are working on complementary projects, because that's how we really advance our impact. So please get in touch after this call if you'd like.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's get our one last question. Can you give any working biodiversity examples in terms of specific species?
That is something that has been highly requested in Cerulean user interviews, and we're definitely interested in exploring. But at the moment, I would say we don't work with any specific species. There are um, a lot of different things you could go into in terms of what the protected areas are aiming to protect, and certain species that are more vulnerable to oil pollution in some areas, which would be awesome to include in Cerulean in the future. But I don't know, Eric, if you have a better answer to that question right now.
Yeah, I don't think so. Our tools are pretty much working at the global level with larger data sets now. And if there are ways to apply that to protection of particular species, then that's excellent. But we don't feature species-specific data at this time.
I see. Well, thank you very much for this. What do we have here? How can we integrate this into eDNA molecular level?
I mean, I am not a microbiologist, but I have demonstrated one of our tools called Monitor at a research institute for a chemistry postdoc who was looking at oil contamination in different harbors. Our data doesn't, well, in Cerulean, it doesn't look high enough resolution into harbors, but on Monitor, which is another satellite monitoring platform, you can see if your study sites had oil pollution in the time range that you're interested in and consider that in terms of testing for certain molecular aspects. That's just one way that it could be integrated. It's definitely, if you're working with study sites anywhere in the world, it's definitely worth looking into whether there is oil infrastructure nearby or oil pollution happening, because that could affect your results.
Thank you. So I think we can encourage all our attendees to browse through the website, and so you can play around with the products that have been presented today. And I believe if you have any questions, you can then reach out afterwards, either through us or through the website, in case you need any assistance with the usage of these projects. So thank you again for this great webinar, and thank you for the many questions. It was really engaging and interactive, and I think these products will be used now by our ECOPs in other countries, and hopefully you our attendees will take it to your colleagues, so that more people will know about these. So thank you so much again, and Bimini and Arik, you are welcome to come back to our webinar at any time if you'd like to do it another time, or on any other product that you might develop in the future. And we wish you really great success with the projects and with your work, because that's really a great one.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
goodbye.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, it was a pleasure from here as well. Thank you so much. So there will be a recording in case any of you here would need to listen to this again and rewatch the presentations. Thank you so much and have a great week. Thank you.